When I saw the Aiden Ross collab, I thought, this doesn't have emotion. It was awkward, it was weird. But then I saw Trump on Theo Vaughn, and he started talking about cocaine, and I was like, uh-oh.
If you get a person who's going to go onto a podcast and get to their level, speak their language, and appeal to their listeners, someone like Trump on there who is just like, well, I don't know much about the guy outside of, like, a lot of people hate him, but, like, I don't know, he seems like a normal person to me. And then all of a sudden, that's what percentage of his listeners are like, yeah, I wasn't even thinking of voting, but yeah, I'm going to vote for the guy.
So who is he? And is he getting young men to swing left? Tony O'Sullivan went and talked to him, and he is out front.
Tony O'Sullivan.
This is Hasan Piker.
This is my dog, Kaya. I thought you legitimately were going to work out.
I can do some weights.
He's a social media superstar with almost 3 million followers on the video streaming platform Twitch.
They're eating the pets.
So this is that whole masculinity thing people are talking about, huh?
And he's part of a growing group of streamers and podcasters reaching young men online, a space Trump tapped into to reach young male voters.
Punch in, then you won't be able to see that he's not doing any weights.
But Hasan is not a Trump supporter. He's a progressive, a fan of Bernie and AOC. The Democratic Party even invited him to the DNC in August.
One thing we've been hearing for weeks now is that the left needs a Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I don't think that the Democratic Party can podcast itself out of this issue. Joe Rogan, he endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020. Maybe they should do an autopsy on why he left the party.
Yeah, I've heard.
Fuck, ain't that the truth? You know, it's just like right now the Democrats are doing what the Democrats always do, which is, hey, we just lost really bad. We need to reassess. Apparently, we need to go more right. Why? Because it's where America's at. They want to go right. It's like, okay, so you lost by like 2.6 million votes. That's not a huge loss electorally in terms of the entire country and who they were voting for in terms of parties. And you lost key swing states for a lot of very identifiable reasons. And a large part of it is because a lot of people are tuned out. You can't do this whole, like, we need to be neoliberal warmongers because that's in public interest. No, it's not. Everyone's disgusted by seeing dead babies on their fucking screens all day. Not to mention, your working class policies are being reversed as quickly as you're implementing them. It's like, hey, we cut the child tax credit. Child poverty is now cut in half, and now it's back. We're going to eliminate all student debt. We got 6, 7, 8% eliminated. Was that not enough? And it's like, no, that's not enough. Like, people can't afford homes right now. People directly tie the cost of the cost of their groceries to the administration, because the administration has not done a good job of conveying or even attacking corporate greed or trying to do price fixing so that they can't do that. And yes, that was something that they announced in you know, Kamala's policy, but it's one of those things where, like, oh, the election's coming up. All right, well, here's the pitch. We need to heavily fund Ukraine, heavily fund Israel. That's in America's security interests. Well, at the same time, we're not going to provide working class, and don't worry about the hypocrisy of those two first ones. We're not going to provide working class policies that are directly going to benefit people who are poor. And then there's a guy on the other side who's basically going to weaponize all the identity politics that we've been trying to point out to everybody are the bad things about him. He's a racist, he's a sexist, and then he goes off and does racist and sexist things, but the average voter is not thinking about that when they're having trouble paying their bills. And okay, so we need Joe Rogan. We need to get a Joe Rogan. And it's like, everyone keeps looking at this in reverse, though. Like, it's the inverse of the situation, right? Why did Joe Rogan gravitate towards a person like Bernie Sanders and then gravitate towards a person like Donald Trump? What could have caused that? Is that indicative of a whole bunch of, like, potentially non-politically affiliated voters and where they move?
You say when it comes to stuff that guys like, you know, you seek that stuff out online, whether it's watching a streamer, whether it's watching guys talking about working out and fitness. You say that the right wing just dominates that space.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think that's why I started on Twitch, right? I know for a fact that the video game space is, like, people who consume this culture, people who are a part of this culture, are not all right-wing. I wanted to showcase to people that, like, no, you can be a progressive person, you can be a leftist, and, like, have fun at the same time.
How many people were watching your live stream on election night?
The total unique number was 7.5 million.
There's a general sense that when it comes to the world of podcasts, alternative media, I don't even know what you want to call it, that Trump did a much better job at that than Democrats and Harris.
That's like more than TV. That's wild. I had no idea.
Absolutely. I think that's true. When I saw the Aiden Ross collab, I thought, this doesn't have emotion. It was awkward. It was weird. But then I saw Trump on Theo Von, and he started talking about cocaine. And I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, I don't know if that's going to resonate with everyone, but Theo Von, his most popular meme that like extends beyond people who even know who Theo Von is Theo Von being asked the question, "Hey man, what's your favorite strain of weed?" And he's like, "My favorite strain of weed? Cocaine." And like, that's funny. That's objectively, that's a funny joke. It's a well timed and well placed joke. It's like it pulls the rug from under you. And even if you don't know who the guy is or his politics or anything about him, you're just going to see that and laugh, right? And so if you get someone like Donald Trump who's going on to a podcast, and this is bigger than cocaine, okay? This is more just about the fact that if you get a person who's going to go on to a podcast and get to their level, speak their language, and appeal to their listeners. It doesn't matter if it's the 11 million to 13 million on Joe Rogan or however many million Theo Von gets. There's going to be a large percentage of people who are not politically tapped in, who are not every single day consuming political news and media like, we are on this channel, etc., and are just on Theo Von's channel because they like listening to dudes be dudes, comedians be comedians. That's all they care about is they just want to listen to that. And then all of a sudden you get someone like Trump on there who are just like, well, I don't know much about the guy outside of like a lot of people hate him, but like, I don't know, he seems like a normal person to me. And then all of a sudden that's what percentage of his listeners are like, yeah, I wasn't even thinking of voting, but yeah, I'm going to vote for the guy.
This humanizes him.
So you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Harris did consider going on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But she didn't. What is it that the Democrat Party has to do differently?
Well, I think that they need to change their policies.
It's a policy thing.
Yes, it's 100% a policy thing. Which is the boring answer. Although it would be very self-serving for me to say, I'm the left's Joe Rogan, the Democratic Party should give me millions of dollars. That's not going to solve this problem. What will solve this problem is if the Democratic Party actually adopts real left.
So just so we're clear, this was the Harris campaign manager's senior advisor explains why Kamala Harris was unwilling to differentiate herself more from Joe Biden on policy.
On the Biden question, we of course got that everywhere we went. And we knew what the data was. We knew we had to show her as her own person and point to the future and not try to rehash the past. She also felt that she was part of the administration. And unless we said something like, well, I would have handled the border completely differently, we were never going to satisfy anybody. We were trying to tell a story and give the impression that she was different without pointing to a specific issue.
Can I ask this, why not a specific issue? Is this something she was unwilling to do? You worried it would feel disingenuous?
She felt like she was part of the administration, so why should she look back and cherry pick some things that she would have done differently when she was part of it? She had tremendous loyalty to President Biden. You've been on plenty of campaigns. Imagine if we said, well, we would have taken this approach on the border. Imagine
what could have happened. We're never going to please everybody. And ultimately, it's more important that we preserve Joe Biden's ego, okay, than potentially defeating Hitler too. All right. And that to us was just crucial, paramount to our entire policies.
Imagine the round of stories coming out after that of people saying, well, she never said that in the meeting, or what meeting when she said this, or I remember when she did that. And it wasn't going to give us what we needed because it wouldn't be a clean break. It would be, days upon days in a limited time window that we had of dealing of who, what, when, where. So the best we could do And the most that she felt comfortable with was saying, like, look, vice presidents never break with their presidents. The only time in recent memory is when Pence broke with Trump after Trump stormed the Capitol.
They call that the murder.
Okay, so first off, so many things going on here, but one of the quickest things to identify is that how much of that was genuinely her concern and or policy versus how much the advisors were telling her that she had to do. I'll never know. None of us will, right? We don't know what was happening behind the scenes, but clearly a complete and utter disaster. You can point towards that moment on The View where everyone is just like, what the fuck are you doing? This makes no sense. It's like, how are you in any way different than your predecessor, Joe Biden? Oh, I don't think in any way I am. You know what? I am in one way. Perhaps I'd appoint a Republican to my cabinet. There you go. Another problem is being just responding to this statement, being like, come on, there's not really any single vice president who's different than the president in any way, except for Mike Pence. So remember, coup attempt, the people trying to scale, QAnon becomes Spider-Man, bad thing. And then he's like, yeah, they call that the murder exception. Like Pod Save America too, you're also part of the problem, right? You're getting these incredibly crucial interviews with people who don't speak to anyone else. And to be fair, the Democrats and Democratic senior advisors are not going to speak to someone who's actually going to be questioning any of their policies. They just want a yes men echo chamber. So that's why they'd go on a Pod Save America style podcast. And then immediately that's something that should have been like, well, that's a weird thing to say. Why did you just say, because like he was polling enormously unpopular. He was not a popular president near the end of his term. People were not buying the sales pitch that they were doing, where it was a combination of two things simultaneously, right? It was both, hey, by the way, I'm on one end going to be telling everybody that we need to support Ukraine because they are being invaded and colonized, and at the same time, we need to support Israel because it's in American interests, and so we need to spend tons of money on that. Everyone is watching, you know, again, carnage, dead babies. It's one of the most galvanizing moments of our time. We're witnessing a genocide just be broadcast on TikTok and be put forward to the eyes of the world, and they're discussed. So he's becoming increasingly more and more unpopular. A lot of the reversal of his initial policies to help people economically are forgotten in those 4 years. It's kind of like, hey, by the way, did you know he did pretty good on COVID, better than Trump did on COVID, and he did a lot of policies that actually helped working class families back in the day. I know that it doesn't feel that way now, but he's actually subtly reduced the cost of inflation, actually. And I know it's not something you might feel when you're buying your groceries. It kind of feels as if inflation has gone up, but it's not actually what you think. It's actually been lowered a little bit, and so I wouldn't do any single change to the policy. All this shit, like, you had to differentiate yourself. You had to separate yourself. You had to offer people a new path. And she still, by the way, managed to get 72 million votes. That's still a lot of people, and a lot, I would say, people who are voting out of a rejection of Donald Trump, still voting out of a rejection of, holy shit, this guy is like full-blown right-wing, racist, misogynist. He's going to try and continue to oppress women, take away abortion rights. That's really scary. You know, the one thing that she was actually really good at hammering home that Donald Trump then had to reverse course on and pull back and be like, I don't care about this as much. Well, then at that point, you could have closed that gap. That difference of that many crucial votes, especially in swing states, for example, if you had appealed to Arab and Muslim voters, right, who were understandably completely horrified with the things that they were seeing, and then go from there.
Your exemption. If the president tries to murder you, you can break. Yes.
If you are, you know, ripping up the Constitution, trying to overturn an election, people die, then you could break with your president.
Yep. And that just shows you how profoundly out of touch Democratic insiders are. And because they're so profoundly out of touch, they're going to continue to push these kind of narratives where it's like, at the end of the day, we had to do, and she was very, very happy to say how proud she was of Joe Biden and how proud she was of Joe Biden's decision and his administration. And so we were not in a position to separate ourselves from the Biden administration. And honestly, the only person who's really done that is Mike Pence. Am I right? Yeah, you're totally right. Great idea. Yeah. It's a good thing that we have our own alternatives to the Joe Rogans, right? We got the Pod Save Americas, basically the echo chamber where we can say that you're good in all things, except that one time that we stepped out of line and said that you probably should let Joe Biden step down because he doesn't speak English. And then immediately it was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to plant a story about how Pod Save America apparently are bad. And then it's like, what? It's just like, oh, okay, well, sorry, we shouldn't have stepped out of line.
Swing economic populist messaging instead of purposefully avoiding that stuff because they're terrified of upsetting their corporate donors. I think Trump speaks to male insecurities better, and I think Trump speaks to the anger that people have. Whereas the other side of the political spectrum does not speak to that anger at all.
There's been a lot of controversy around you.
Yes.
The way you talk about Israel is viewed by some as anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Of course not. The real problem here is that I'm an anti-Zionist. The real problem here is that I'm extremely critical of Israel and all of the information that's readily available, especially on social media for so many people that don't necessarily rely on mainstream media any longer to get their information. And that's why you see this generational gap. If you're over the age of 35, you're still operating on the old boundaries. You're like, no, Israel's the most moral democracy in the Middle East, maybe in the world, right? Like, and I think that the major generational divide that is, I think, in a very damaging way, feeding into the mistrust overall that people have with mainstream news in general, is coming from that.
Joni O'Sullivan, CNN, Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was just so thoughtful and important to hear that. Ken Martin is out front. He is running to be the next chair of the DNC. He's the current chairman of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And I really appreciate your time.
Ugh, jump scare. What's going on here? Hey, I should be the former and now incoming chair of the DNC. It's happening, everyone. It was short but sweet. I thought that was a really good interview, and I thought he did a really good job of, getting a couple of quick points across, and then the important one obviously being that there is a consistent conflation with the actions of the Israeli government with all Jewish people, which I find to be itself abhorrent and anti-Semitic, and something that's pushed back against by many anti-Israeli organizations run by Jewish people, if not now org, not in our name, just to name a few. And there has to be a consistent differentiation between the two, not only to avoid, the negative consequences that come from people associating the actions of a horrifying government with an entire ethnicity and religion, which is what Christian nationalists are pushing for people to do when they conflate the two of those topics together. And in addition to that, weaponizing that and then associating people like Hasan or other streamers with, the likes of Jake Shields, someone who is a white supremacist and someone who is a, bigot who hates trans people, who has said vile things and hates Jewish people for being Jewish, with someone who wants to be critical of a foreign nation is very dangerous indeed. He looks exactly who I'd expect to run the DNC. Well, he's not perfected the art of smiling. It seems like he's still working on that, but perhaps soon.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/The Serfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.